live.
Wow.
Yeah.
How about that intro video, huh?
Oof, what a ride.
Weekly bits, am I right?
That was engaging.
Well, guys, happy Friday. Today is September the 11th, a day which will live in infamy, but we won't go into that. We're here to talk about Bitcoin, right?
That's right.
So guys, we had a long weekend last weekend, we had a short week this week, but tons of stuff happened. Surprise, surprise.
Bitcoin never sleeps.
Yeah, it never sleeps. You trade on the weekend. That's just what you do. So guys, let's just jump into this news, right?
Let's do it.
Let's kick it off with some big news around the Bitmain lawsuit with Poolen. And I don't know if we have the right image up, but we're going to figure that out pretty soon. We do. Look at that. Am I pointing to it?
Yep.
All right. Good for me. So, guys, huge news going between Bitmain and Poolen. The TLDR is that Poolen has escaped the initial lawsuit around them creating their own mining pool. Pete, you want to talk more about it?
Yeah, so this goes back a few months. Poolin, which is like a pretty powerful and influential and successful Bitcoin mining pool, was founded by three folks who used to work at BTC.com, which is Bitmain's own mining pool operation. So they left Bitmain, founded pretty successful competitor, and Bitmain wasn't super pleased about that. So they sued these three founders, and the topical news now is that the founders have the lawsuit has been dismissed by the Chinese court. However, the founders are probably still subject to some fines for breaking their non-compete clauses that they had with Bitmain when they did this founding. So I'm skipping a lot of the legalese. You should definitely go double check, do your own research on this story if you're interested. But that's kind of the summary. So these are two super major influential Bitcoin mining operations. So the beef to me was interesting between them two, but it appears that it's kind of winding down to a close.
Yeah, neither of us, surprise, surprise, are lawyers. We're also not a lot of things, but what we are great news reporters, and we can tell you that the main thing here is that these three founders of Poolen split off. All right, and they had a non-compete that said that they couldn't really do this. But what it looks to me like is that this first lawsuit was to Bitmain, from Bitmain to Poolen itself, and not the actual kind of three founders that violated their non-compete. And so it's, I guess, not that surprising that this whole damages suit was dropped by the court. But it looks like these guys aren't out the woods yet. Regardless, it's interesting how all of this happened. The split when Poolen was founded was 2017, which we all remember as a very interesting time for the ethos of mining pools around Bitcoin. So it's interesting that there's probably a lot more to the backstory than them just splitting off, but anything that we can report would just be speculation at that point.
Yeah, I'm not sure we'll ever hear the true story of Poolin versus Bitmain /BTC.com, but it's one of those I'm hopeful we'll check back in, and when we finally get the full-on documentary treatments on Bitcoin's history and the feature films, this is going to be one of those.
We're all kicked back in our lawn chairs, chilling on the moon.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Watching our brain implants play our new Netflix documentaries. Hopefully this is going to get covered.
Yeah, sounds fun. All right, well, next big story that happened was this whole SIM swapping lawsuit with AT&T.
Yeah, so some more legal news. This news in and of itself wasn't that major, but to give a quick summary, Michael Turpin, who's a cryptocurrency holder, he founded BitAngel, which was kind of like an angel fund for crypto projects. He had a lawsuit going with AT&T, arguing that AT&T willfully or kind of negligently left his data suspect to SIM swapping. He lost millions of dollars in crypto. I don't think any actual Bitcoin was lost, but he's a Bitcoin hodler to a swim swap attack. So he's suing AT&T, blaming them. That lawsuit has been dismissed. I think it was hundreds of millions of dollars Turpin was looking for. But a separate suit looking for straight up compensation for the $20 million in crypto that he lost is still open. So I think what was interesting to me about this story the most is that I think that SIM swapping as an attack on crypto holders is rising. I think it has implications, especially for Bitcoiners. And it's just some news that happened this week that I thought was a good opportunity to kind of bring that story back up to the surface. So we've done a good job covering that over at Bitcoin Magazine. So I wanted to remind people, like, hey, this is still an issue. There's still stuff you need to do to protect your Bitcoin a little bit better. And this was news that reminded me of that.
Let me tell you guys something. I want you to just look into my eyes. Do not two-factor anything that needs security with your cell phone number. Just don't do it. It is the biggest security loophole you could possibly enter into.
Brandon, the cell phone carriers are telling me that it's safe.
Don't do it. Don't take the risk. That's a trusted third party, a cell phone company, all right? You can have people try and SIM swap. It's not safe. This is a great example of it not being safe. Don't do it. There are better solutions for two-factor than a phone number. Just don't use a phone number. It can't be any more clear. I feel like we've said this 1,000 times, but if you're watching this and you haven't heard us say it before, just don't. Just use any sort of other two-factor authentication method, whether it be, everyone has their own kind of downfalls, like a Authy, Google Auth, whatever. Use something besides your phone number.
Better than your phone.
Better than your phone.
So the coverage that we gave to this suit originally a few months ago also included some coverage of a research paper from some Harvard and Princeton researchers who are straight up telling you that all the major cell phone carriers are not secure when it comes to SIM swapping. So if you didn't want to take our word for it, you can do some digging and you'll kind of see how unsafe this is. So we've told you 1,000 times not to 2FA with your cell phones. We've told you 1,000,000 times, not your keys, not your coins, but put your Bitcoin in cold storage. I mean, this is another reason to do that.
Yeah, I mean, that solves a bunch of problems right there.
Yeah.
Good old cold storage. It works, guys. It works. So moving on to kind of what I think is the coolest news from this week. I don't know about you, but we had some discrete log contract news pop up.
Big news. That is pretty cool. I'll put it in my favorite pile as well.
Yeah. So, here's two non-technical people that are going to try and break this down for you, so to laugh all the way as we're doing this. But let's describe what kind of the basics of a discrete log contract is.
Sure. So, I mean, the basics is a smart contract. You don't have to reveal to the Oracle what the conditions of the contract are. I think is probably the discrete aspect of it. In particular with this news, so DLCs are not super new, but my understanding, and shout out to Marty Bent for reporting this, this is the first DLC, the DLC we're about to describe is the first one that's going live on Bitcoin's mainnet.
Yeah, and so basically what the DLC is, in this case, is it was Dorier from BTC Pay server and from the, what was it?
Assured Bits.
Assured Bit, Assured Bits.
Like
Chris Stewart.
Yeah, and Chris has been working hard on making this a possibility.
Yeah, Assured Bits is doing great work on DLCs, and they came together and they're like, let's do a bet. It's a 1 Bitcoin bet on who's going to win the election, and so this is a perfect use case
presidential election.
Yeah, presidential election. U.S. presidential election.
Yes.
I want to get real specific. 2020 U.S. presidential. Okay, anyway, it's a one Bitcoin bet of who's going to win. They entered into it together, and they're using an oracle to determine who wins the bet. This is all using DLCs, discrete log contracts. So this is like a beautifully illustrated use case of exactly what DLCs can enable. There's tons of other...
Yeah, but also, I mean, I think one thing I enjoy thinking about is like if you can bet in a trusted way through Bitcoin transaction on the presidential election, I mean, you can do a ton of other stuff. So like that's I think what's most exciting. It's like this is unlocking, and for me, it's unlocking a use case that people argue other blockchains are better for, and this is like an important first or second step.
Bring it on Bitcoin.
Yeah, putting it on Bitcoin. So it's like, again, it's another one. It's like, eventually we're going to find a way to put all this stuff on Bitcoin. So
Yeah.
Just stop talking about the need for other blockchains. I don't want to hear it.
Exactly. Bitcoin will slowly absorb all the functionality that has been built out elsewhere with less decentralization, less sound money, and all the things that Bitcoin has. So This is just one example, but I do think that the DLCs, discrete log contracts, will open up tons of crazy futuristic business models and truth sourcing algos and all sorts of stuff that it can allow. So if you want to read more about discrete log contracts, Bitcoin Magazine is the place to go.
Definitely, we got some good DLC. We got some old. Shout out to Aaron Von Werner for, as always, being on top of this potential. We got some legacy DLC content. We just hosted a technical Thursday yesterday with the SureBits team. To me, these are the two guys that, you know, it's straight from the horse's mouth to talk about DLCs on Bitcoin. And, you know, I don't want to tease anything, get people too excited out there in advance, but, you know, keep your eyes peeled on Bitcoin Magazine. I think we're gonna have some more firsthand, like, written content around this potential as well. The other thing I was gonna say is, like, so this is really exciting. Awesome way to add some new important functionality to Bitcoin. Also a great way to flex that you can bet one whole BTC on the presidential election. So
yeah, a couple of OGs right there.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put any money on this thing because who knows?
Yeah, let alone that much Bitcoin.
Yeah. Well, anyway, that does for our main news. There is one more story that I think.
Yeah, is there, Brandon? Is there something else you wanted to discuss at the tail end of this show?
You know, it's just not everything that's really fascinating and interests Bitcoin happens on Bitcoin necessarily right now. And one of those things that I think you guys would just enjoy me reviling in the tales of.
I know I would.
Yeah, is this thing called Sushi. All right. Now let's do like for Bitcoiners. What does this mean? Why would I even pay attention to this thing?
You know, if you want to go back, I think it's 2 weeks. You can hear some of the intro to this, and basically you can catch up to what my understanding is at this point, because Brandon explained yams to us a couple weeks ago. The other kind of precursor hot DeFi project, Resume.
Unpause. All right. So the yams and sushi and all these food coins are all trying to do basically the same thing broadly with different protocol implementations and ways that they work. And the idea is that they're going to get a community to run a DeFi project on Ethereum. And this one is very interesting because it's trying to run a DEX, a decentralized exchange, on top of Ethereum using something called an automated market maker, AMM. And so, you know, you can look up these terms. I'm not going to go into it because I don't want to spend too much time on this topic. But what's interesting is that Sushi was basically a liquidity attack on Uniswap, which is kind of the most famous DEX, to basically incentivize everyone to move their liquidity off of Uniswap and onto this Sushi DEX. And by doing that, they were going to reward the people who did that with the fees that are generated on the exchange. Super interesting. It all came to a complete disastrous head when the token started going down in price because they print a crap ton of the tokens, and you know it's eventually going to get devalued.
Fundamental difference between Sushi and Bitcoin.
There's so many. Sushi has nothing. Like,
of the many.
Yeah, Sushi does not even compete with Bitcoin. It's like, think of it as competing with Binance. All right, but so what's interesting is that all of this came to a head when the creator of Sushi, who awarded himself a whole bunch of tokens of Sushi as being the creator.
Fundamental difference between Sushi and Bitcoin.
Fundamental difference. Yep. Decided that he was going to sell all of his Sushi tokens for ETH. He was like, look, I made a lot of money for myself. I made a lot of money for you guys. I'm going to cash out like a week after the project launched, and basically said, you know what, let me ride into the sunset. Well, we thought that that's kind of where the story would end. But then Sam Bankman-Fried, old SBF of FTX, came in and was like, yo, this project isn't dead. There's a really cool thing happening. I'm going to figure out how to migrate this thing. And so Sam swooped in, created a multi-sig kind of treasury management system, got the whole thing back up and running, migrated all this liquidity off of Uniswap onto Sushi, and then once that was all finished, and this is what happened today, like literally less than a couple hours ago, Sushi Chef, the guy who created it, came back and was like, oh guys, I'm returning all of the ETH that I made from selling all the sushi. We'll put it back into the treasury of Sushi, and everyone will be happy and all that kind of stuff. And so it's just been this like total cluster of absolute chaos of trying to launch an attack vector on Uniswap and take all the liquidity off. So, guys, this is like fascinating to watch. It's terrible to try and tie your money up into it, so I don't recommend anyone doing that. Say with Bitcoin, you'll be fine. But it's funny to watch these different projects try and just launch and compete with each other and try and build this decentralized finance, quote unquote, world that's all based on, the US dollar. So like, what is it really doing? Nothing.
Based on the US dollar, full of inflationary tokens, full of central point of failure project creators who can single-handedly influence the entire project by moving their funds, etc.
But
But
creating a fully functional decentralized exchange. Pretty cool. So that's kind of the Sushi story. If you want to learn more about it, don't come to Bitcoin Magazine because we don't have anything about it. But
Brandon,
yeah, you can tweet at me and tell me how terrible I am for even talking about this. But I think it's cool. All right, I think it's cool.
What are some lessons learned? I mean, like, help me tie this into. So you've taken out my brain space. You're forcing me to acknowledge what Sushi is as a disgruntled maximalist.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
What am I? Give me a silver lining here. What lessons can I bring to my daily hodling activities?
The lessons that you can learn, there's a few lessons, and I'm thinking off the top of my head right here. But the first and foremost, I apologize for bringing this into your headspace because it's dirty and disgusting and terrible, yada, yada, yada. All right. Lesson one. Lesson two is that you should always check these codes to see if the founder, quote unquote, has awarded himself a whole bunch of the tokens. Because right there, you're basically opening up an exit for this guy to basically just be like, all right, peace, this thing's running as much as I want to make it run, and I'm going to cash out and be done with it. And then you're sitting there with a whole bunch of bags of this really worthless token, right?
Is that a Charlie Lee move right there?
People have been comparing the move to Charlie Lee.
Is he the OG?
He could be, But so anyway, that's a lesson learned. And then I would also say that an interesting lesson to learn is that these new projects with new models, mechanisms, ways of making money on them, open up to all sorts of new ways to be attacked. And so, I don't know if I'm being edgy by calling this an attack on Uniswap, but they sucked money off of Uniswap onto this new DEX by incentivizing people to go there. And so when you're exploring even these new paradigms that seem brilliant, make sure you take some time to figure out how these things can spectacularly fail, because chances are they will. I think that's the biggest lesson of all, is that most of this DeFi stuff is eventually going to fail, and you should not plan on holding your life savings in there. Bitcoin's a much better option.
I think that's what people were saying about the digital cash projects up until someone stumbled upon Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean,
is there going to just be continuous iteration with these lessons learned and points of failure in DeFi until one of these food projects actually hits on a solid idea?
Yeah, and I mean, they're hitting on solid ideas, but all the solid ideas are based on the US dollar, right. And so they're all going to fail eventually, right? But what the interesting point, we talked about this last night on Drinks in Quarantine. If you want to check that out, we had a YouTuber edition, Max Kaiser, BTC Sessions, a whole bunch of really cool guys. We talked about how there's a learning process of Bitcoin, and that it is inevitable that people are going to look at Bitcoin, they're going to think they can make money in there, then they're going to see all these alts, they're going to be like, oh, these things are so much better than Bitcoin, because they don't understand what Bitcoin is. And then they screw up, lose a lot of money in there, and eventually come back to Bitcoin. And so there's always going to be a shiny object out there that people think is going to be, make them millions that isn't Bitcoin. But they will fail, and eventually they'll come back to Bitcoin, and we'll all grow, and we'll all learn because of it, and we'll all be happy. So that's, there's a lesson there too. So that does it for the show, though.
All right, yeah, nice show, good week. Everyone enjoy their weekend. Brandon, thanks for keeping us updated on the world of DeFi.
I'm sorry that I have to be that guy, but I think it's cool, and so you just have to deal with it. It's our show, so you got to deal with it. But guys, have a great weekend. Signing off. See ya.
Weekly Bear.